Okay. Well, welcome to the Kitsap Sun's live chat about plans to move ninth graders up to South Kitsap High School. Superintendent Michelle Reed presented her final plan for grade reconfiguration at Wednesday's school board meeting. Michelle is here with us tonight to share more about her plan and to answer your questions about the changes ahead. So Michelle, let's just start by having you outline your plans.
Sure. Thanks, Chris. I appreciate the opportunity and thank the Kitsap Sun for having me on so we can continue the conversation with the community. The plan essentially is a result of the Boundary Review Committee's recommendation, and that group was a representative group of parents and staff from every school in the district that met for close to a year, and they were discussing the most fiscally responsible and equitable distribution of our students, as well as what would be the best educational opportunities for our students. And so they studied research, they looked at a lot of data, and came to the board with a recommendation in the late spring to move students from the Y Lake area, from Sunny Slope to Burley Glenwood, and then also felt that to do further rebounding of the elementary schools would require in excess of 400 student moves to make that function in the next few years, the foreseeable future. So their very strong recommendation, based on educational reasons first, and then of course capacity second, was to move to a grade level reconfiguration of the school district. And their recommendation was to go to K-5 schools, elementary schools, 6-8 middle schools, and then 9-12 high school. They wanted that to happen preferably in the 2016-17 school year, but no later than 17-18. So that recommendation came forward to me and to our board. I then took a look at the data and the financial feasibility of that as well. And if we were to move all ninth graders, for example, up to the high school in 16-17, I'm not sure that we would have as thoughtful a transition as we could. So my recommendation to the board, after giving it a lot of thought and hearing from people, was to have a 4-year phase-in of that grade reconfiguration. And so I'll just summarize it, and I think we'll probably get to the details over the course of the next hour.
Yeah.
But the phase-in, essentially the 15-16 school year, we're going to have 2 committees. We'll have a middle school committee that's going to focus on what would the ideal middle school be to create innovative learners in South Kitsap. And then, of course, a high school committee to talk about how do you integrate the 9th grade into the high school in a way that's amazing, you know, for all students at the high school. So 15-16 will be a planning year. The 17-18 year, because one of the drivers of this decision is capacity issues at the elementary, we decided to take the students in the most crowded feeder group. We have 3 feeder groups in the district. The most crowded is the Cedar Heights feeder group.
And what do you mean by feeder group?
The feeder groups are determined. We have 3 junior highs, and they feed into 1 high school.
Gotcha.
And so the elementary schools that feed a particular junior high, we characterize them as a feeder group.
Gotcha.
So in this case, our most crowded feeder group really is Sunny Slope Elementary School, Sidney Glen, which will top 700 students this year, and then Burley Glenwood is in that feeder area. So currently, so what we've decided is that in that first year, to relieve pressure at those most crowded schools, we're going to move the 9th graders at Cedar Heights to the high school for 16-17, and the 6th graders from Sunny Slope, Sidney Glen, and either Burley Glenwood or Hidden Creek, depending on enrollment at that time, up to Cedar Heights to be a middle school. Then the following year, of course, we would roll the 2nd, 3rd forward of 9th graders and 6th graders, and by 18-19, all students would be fully integrated into the new grade configuration.
Okay. I just wanted to jump back a minute to, you know, the nature of what you presented last night. Basically, this is not something that the board votes on. It's not, you know, this is a management decision.
That's correct.
If you can clarify that this is not something that the board eventually is going to have to vote on. It's
sure.
Your decision as superintendent.
We're a policy governance district in the South Kitsap School District, which means that the board governs through ends, and the ends in this case are around student achievement and relationships and graduation rates and so forth. In fact, we just worked very hard this year on our current strategic plan moving forward to 2020. And so the board has some clear ends around community involvement, partnerships, a focus on the whole child, and so forth. But those management decisions, in other words, the drivers to get to the ends, are the responsibility of district administration.
But basically, this you have now decided this, and this is the direction that.
That's correct.
That is correct.
Right. Okay. What I will say, though, Chris, that's important to note in the plan that I've written and that will be on my blog in the morning, is that there are decision points at different points in the 4 years. We could decide. Let me clarify that one of the real reasons why we want to start with one feeder first is to make sure that we have a really amazing model for how we're going to manage ninth graders at the high school, and an amazing middle school model, so that we can, in a more controlled size group, make sure that we get the systems in place and structures in place before we simply move everybody up. I'm not sure that would be a thoughtful transition. There are a lot of staffing decisions to be taken into consideration, as well as student and family needs. So we're really trying to study it, pilot it, and then move it forward when we know all the systems are going.
Cedar and that whole group would almost be considered like a pilot group.
Right, that's correct.
We've got a question here about, I saw Hidden Creek will now feed into Cedar Heights after this year, since it's always fed into Marcus. How about the opt-in, opt-out work for parents who may live closer to Marcus? Is there, would there be an option for this parent?
Oh, absolutely. I think one of the things we're really trying to base this phase-in model, one of the, if you will, underpinning foundational ideas is that families have choices, right? So we're not, today I'm not ready to say that for sure it's going to be Hidden Creek feeding, Cedar Heights. Okay. We think it'll be either Hidden Creek or Burley Glenwood that will move up, and maybe both. But if a parent lives closer to Marcus and their child goes to Hidden Creek, of course we would, accommodate that. Absolutely.
Okay. Talk about some of the advantages, like what does the research show about, having ninth graders up at the high school?
Sure. Well, I will talk about both advantages. I think there are strong advantages for the 6th grade to move to middle school, particularly in the math and science areas. Okay. And the research nationally, which I've included in my memo, talks about many elementary schools don't have dedicated science lab space. And when a student can attend a middle school, there are dedicated science lab areas. So that really enhances the capacity for a stronger STEM focus, if you will, for those students that enjoy the engineering and science technology areas. Mathematics also, at a middle school, you have, as I mentioned earlier, 3 feeder schools usually. So the economy of scale, you're going to have more kids to be able to differentiate math classes. So kids there are more options for math courses in 6th grade.
And how about developmentally for the middle schoolers?
Well, I think one of the national trends, which I noted, since let me look at this real quick. Since 1970, I believe it is. Yeah, since 1970, middle schools have grown by over 10,000 schools around the country, and junior highs have really declined, the 7-9, because many districts have moved into the 9th grade to high school model. So one of the reasons 9th grade starts your high school transcript, and that's really important to consider. And the access to multiple world language classes. If you're in a junior high, we can't offer German, French, Mandarin, Chinese, Spanish, at all junior highs. So if a student really wants to take a particular language, it's much easier and more accessible if they're part of a high school.
The high school, yeah.
Right.
And you're trying to do some of that now. You're doing some busing for limited classes, but it's limited.
Well, this coming year, an example, Chris, is that we don't have enough students in any one junior high to offer algebra trig at each junior high. So we're busing kids from all 3 junior highs to the high school to be able to take algebra trig.
Okay. So let's see. I'm going to get back to that question a little bit, but I wanted to ask about the logistical challenges, because clearly people have noted, who went through the high school in the late 90s, early 2000s. They talk about having difficulty making their classes on time, and feeling like kind of sardines in the
I've heard
New York
the stories.
subway. You've heard the stories. And so what are some of the logistical challenges of moving these ninth graders up to South Kitsap High School?
Sure. Well, I think there are logistical challenges, obviously, to any transition, but I do believe that going with a 4-year phase-in plan enables us to rearrange some programs. Tom O'Brien, our Director of Facilities, has indicated that a double classroom portable to purchase costs $250,000, and then to provide plumbing is another $50,000. So the rough figures are about $300,000 for a double portable. So rather than purchase several of those, which in the Boundary Review Committee, that was one of the discussions, you would have to add some portable classrooms to accommodate the ninth graders. We're going to take, in year, I believe it is 18-19.
Would you like to take your jacket off?
No, I'm just no, that's okay. But the lights are hot.
I know.
In the year 17-18, we're going to move the Explorer Academy to another school location so that we're able to create more room. That'll create 6 more classrooms. So that'll enable space for more students.
So you want to do this without buying more portables?
Well, that's the idea, because if we're buying more portables, if we have to spend $300,000 for a plumbed portable, that's $300,000 that won't go to school programs for kids. So we want to try to rearrange things so we're not spending more money. We're currently already utilizing 85 portable classrooms in the school district.
And do you know how many are at the high school?
10.
10. Okay. Well, I was, looking at the previous bond measure when they were trying to pass a bond for a second high school, and they were saying that the enrollment at the high school was running, 2,400, 2,500,
right,
and it felt crowded then. I was looking at your most recent enrollment report that was actually given last night and kind of did some calculations. If you put the ninth graders in just based on this snapshot,
right,
your average full-time equivalent student, this is not even number of bodies, but sort of the equivalent students is over 2,500. And if you want to talk about head count, you're right around 2,900. I mean, it sounds like you're heading towards the crowding situation there. You want to just address that and say other strategies you might have?
Sure.
What do you expect it's going to be like for kids there?
First of all, Chris, I think some of the numbers we're talking about, the 2,900 head count and 2,500 FTE, include our students that are at Explorer Academy, Discovery, the Discovery School, and our online school. We have a growing online school within the school district.
Right.
So I know that there are, one of the things we've talked about are flex schedules. We've also talked about adding classroom space from what we previously had, and that's the purpose of utilizing the Explorer campus, for example.
Okay.
But, and we'll have to also contemplate how we're best using our classroom space within the high school.
Okay. And there was also some talk about kind of flex scheduling or flex arrivals or something like that. What was that?
We already have kids that come to 0 hours or perhaps a 7th hour that either take a flex class before the regular school day starts or even afterwards. So there is some of that going on currently. And we're, I think, within the range at this point of, as the years move forward, carefully looking at that and making sure we have the proper room. Mr. O'Brien has indicated we could add more portable classrooms if we needed to, so that's another possibility if we really need to go down that route.
Okay. Okay. And then, here's a question. Somebody's asking about will the school district offer more class options for the junior highs that have not integrated will be available to the ninth graders that have integrated? And I think I had the same question, which is, I'm going to rephrase it here. What will the district do to ensure all ninth graders have equal access to classes during the transitional year?
So it's a great question, and we've already, as you know, added classes to ninth grade that have traditionally been high school. We've added AP Human Geography, AP Environmental Science. We've added 7th grade algebra sections this year, so we'll have, I believe, in the future, many more students ready for algebra trig at the junior high level. And we will continue to try to bus kids for at least a first period class opportunity to the high school, which we're going to do this coming year. We're going to do everything within our, reasonably possible to make sure that access is equitable. I also want to note again, in the 4-year phase-in plan, I think years 1 and 2 are pretty locked, but we could accelerate the move if there was, sufficient interest community-wise, or if there was a belief that we really needed to accelerate that and not go to year 3 and 4. But that'll be a decision I think we can make, at the end of year 1 and the end of year 2. So it's a roadmap, the phase-in model, but it's not a locked map. In other words, It gives us a pathway so people can see what the direction is, but we can monitor and adjust.
Okay. All right. That's great. All right. We got another poll coming up here. It's not up yet. We won't worry about that. So let's see. We'll get back to the poll. Okay, so we've reported on the district's plans to pursue a bond for a second high school on the 57 acres the district owns on Old Clifton Road, and major renovations at South Kitsap High School. And I bring this in now just because these are two concurrent things that are going on.
Right.
I know people have some questions about it. And is anything that you want to say about the bond at this time?
Well, we're still in a bond exploration period right now.
So it sounded like the board was pretty determined to go ahead and pursue a bond in probably 2016.
I believe that's the plan, right. We don't have the specifics of the bond plan at this point, other than the central focus of that would be a second high school.
Okay.
And based on my knowledge of the history of the district, this is not a new idea. I think I heard about a second high school even the day I interviewed for the job, so it's been a discussion, I think, for many years.
Yeah.
And as you know, Chris, I speak at multiple public venues and service clubs and community organizations, and I don't know that I go through any of those speaking engagements without taking questions about when are you going to, build a second high school.
There's a lot of people out there
Right.
that say they want it. Well, and in fact, we're going to have a little poll up here about the number of bonds that have run since 1990. Do you know the answer to that?
How many bonds have been
I don't
run
want to put
since
you on the spot.
1990?
Yeah.
Well, I haven't been here since
I know.
1990,
It's
but
like a quiz.
I know. Well, I believe.
Oh, here we go.
Perhaps
we put the quiz up here.
there you go. I think at least one, because it was run in 2006, maybe. Seven.
Yeah.
Thank you. I don't know if more than one has been run, to be honest.
Yeah. So we've got this poll up here. We'll see how many people get this right. Since 1990, how many bonds have run? Okay, I can't see the results, so no one's voting yet. We'll come back to it. Okay.
There
And
needs to be some kind of prize for
I know,
the
we need a prize.
winning vote or something. So.
okay. Okay, and then I wanted to talk about, this is not just the bond next year, but there's kind of really a long-range plan.
Yes.
For the bond. It's a phased-in plan. Do you want to talk about this phased-in plan?
Sure. I mean,
Okay, I'm going to hold up this graphic that we got at the meeting.
right. That was a meeting a couple meetings ago. I think the Long Range Capital Facilities Committee.
Their recommendation.
Right. The Long Range Capital Facility Committee recommendation. The board directed that we have a 30-year plan to address the facilities in the school district. So the plan starts from 2014 to 2044. And ironically, if we would have a 30-year plan of the prior 30 years next to you, it would be essentially blank. We haven't done any building in the prior 30 years. In 2014, we were able to do several roofs, the Sidney Glen roof, much of the high school roof, the well at Olalla and a roof, and so forth. Because our voters were really generous in passing the levy in 2013, I believe it was. And then this summer, of course, we're doing the Mullinex Ridge, Hidden Creek, and Burley Glenwood roofs, which are huge projects, again with levy money, so we really appreciate the voter support to do that. But right now, every single square foot of every school in our district is eligible for state matching money, which is very unique. We're not sure there's another district in the state in that that has that opportunity, according to the state folks. So what we needed to do was craft a 30-year plan that would make sure that we maximize that state money. So you have to do certain things in an order, like a remodel has to happen in a certain order, or if you decide to take a school down and rebuild a school, you get certain matching money. So it's a 30-year plan, with the first bond being a new high school and some modest technology upgrades to the current high school. I think we think of the new high school as new, but it's actually the electrical infrastructure really limits even the types of labs we're able to do, particularly in our CTE classes. So
I guess the question that I had when I initially saw this is that, you know, you've got bond layered on bond layered on bond,
right?
And it looked a little intimidating to me at first. What's the impact on taxpayers?
Well, this committee was asked to create a model that would have all school buildings healthy at the end of 30 years and meet student enrollment patterns and needs. So what's unique about this model is that the first bond, once the first bond is passed and we are able to build the new high school, the second bond is layered in a way that it won't change the tax rate. So what the committee did is they crafted a 3-bond scenario over 30 years that would not increase the tax rate once the first bond was passed. It would just be a replacement tax. So the committee felt that that was something that voters could take a look at and say, well, at least they know what's coming 30 years out. I don't think I'll be the superintendent 30 years from now. So,
okay. Well, I just wanted to clarify that this was really a long-range plan, that we're not just talking about, you know, build a second high school and we're done. So. Oh, okay. Well, let me now go over my my quiz about the number of bonds that have run since 1990. It's actually 3.
Oh dear. All right.
Yeah, and they were in 93, 96, and 2007.
Okay.
And I checked this out with Chris Lemke, who has sort of a historical knowledge of this. But anyway, and then the 2007 one did not pass. It was for $163 million. It was for a new high school and a lot of other things.
So I misunderstood your question too, because I thought it was a bond for a new high school since 1990. But those were probably other bonds.
Yeah, I don't know what those other bonds were for, but I do know that, you know, I've been around since then, and I know that the second high school has been talked about for a long time. So that kind of gets us to the central question that I keep hearing, which is, you're going to move all these kids up to the high school. It's probably going to feel crowded. How is this not a ploy by the district to push for a second high school?
Well, it's not a ploy because there is some serious academic and educational enhancement to having kids have access to courses in that 9-12 curriculum that they don't currently have in a junior high setting. So if we're going to need to add some portables to make sure there's room and flex time schedules, it's still going to be less disruptive than continuing to try to bus kids from 3 junior highs to the high school to participate in academic classes. The other thing that's happened, Chris, 2 years ago, the last school district in the area, Central Kitsap, moved their 9th graders up. And so what that created is all the schools in our league then had 9th graders at the high school. So we now have, for their student athletes, so we now have to bus all of our 9th graders who participate in any kind of athletic event to the high school every day during their season, which has affected class time in the afternoon, which isn't a good thing for our students. If they were on site, they wouldn't be, you know, missing that class, and it wouldn't create the need for us to transport. The other thing that kids are missing out on is there are a lot of clubs and activities at our high school. We have an amazing high school. You look at forensics, which is debate, or language clubs, or NJROTC clubs, and our high school ends before our junior highs do. So kids are encouraged to participate in these clubs and activities, but they can't get there in time to do so. Currently, if they were on site, they'd be able to participate in those, which 9th graders across the state do when they're enrolled in a 9-12 high school.
Yeah. Okay, so you know, one reasoning is that it lines up with what the majority of other schools are doing.
Right.
And the other is that, you know, academically it makes sense for ninth graders to be at the high school.
Right.
So how will you sell this to voters who are maybe resistant or skeptical? I mean, you heard Mr. Lamb speak last night. He's on the finance committee, and he you know, he pretty much put it out there that, you know, the district should wait until after any bond to make this change. You're going to run into a lot of skepticism and people who, you know, frankly are on fixed incomes and whatever. What do you have a strategy or idea for presenting this?
Well, my strategy is simply to tell the truth, right? You know, the reasons I can't be clearer, I put them in writing, we'll put it out there, that it's better, we believe, the Boundary Review Committee believes, I believe after a review of the research, that the 9 through 12 structure for high school students would be advantageous for them. Another example, Chris, is our district serves many military families. And it is a regular occurrence for a family to move into our district who, somewhere in the middle of the year, who's had a child in 9th grade at a high school somewhere else in the country. And they come to us and are surprised they're being sent to a junior high to enroll. And often the classes don't line up because they aren't able to take what they were taking in the high school at a junior high. And there are times we lose those kids to other districts because they need them to be in a high school.
Gotcha.
So I think we really need to realize the world around us has been changing. We're one of, I believe, 2 school districts on our side of the mountains that are still in a junior high setting.
Okay.
And for kids that are moving in and out and our mobile population, we need to, I think, move with the rest of the country, which is to move to that 9-12 structure.
Gotcha. Okay. Let's see about a question here. Which junior high will go second and third? There's a second part to this question, but go ahead and answer that.
Well, in the phase-in plan, I haven't identified that yet because it depends on which is the most crowded feeder. Because if you remember, one of the key reasons is we don't continue to disrupt elementary boundaries. So whether it'll be Sedgwick Junior High or Marcus Whitman, I'm not sure. It'll depend on which school has the most crowded feeder, which we need to move 6th grade out of so they have more room.
So you'll see in 2 or 3 years.
Well, I think within 2 years we'll know.
2 years,
right.
Yeah.
And the other point that I made, Chris, is if everything goes amazingly in the 17-18 year, 16-17 year, actually, when we put that first group through, we may, if there's enough interest, pressure, desire, we can make that adjustment and we could accelerate the plan, and then maybe the remaining 2 go simultaneously.
Yeah. And then the second part of the question, you know, we did address this before, and I hope and ask that you were here to hear this, but maybe I'll just have her touch on it again. How do you justify lack of opportunities for kids compared to Cedar, which goes first? You know.
Well, we are allowing a certain, Cedar will go, and then we may have some more space. So we're allowing open enrollment, you know, on a space available basis for those kids who are, you know, whatever space we're able to take in that first wave. But again, we are going to try to provide as much of the similar coursework and or bus for one period to the high school if we can for the remaining 9th graders.
Right, but the reality is it's not going to be
perfectly equal, probably not.
Perfectly equal, okay.
No.
Okay.
Well, the reality is it's not today. We currently have, well, we don't have the same languages available at each junior high.
Oh.
The same music programs aren't available.
Okay.
So right now there are some inequities. They're not as, you know, out there, but they're not all the same course offerings or exactly the same presentation of content.
I see. Okay. So we have a question. Will 9th graders be in the general population at the high school or have a campus of their own? What's your thought on that?
It's a great question, and as I mentioned to you earlier, we're going to have 2 committees. There'll be a high school committee that will make that recommendation, and we hope we have quite a few parents and students as well as staff on that committee. I think that the school within a school model for 9th graders is certainly a model that's received a lot of attention for being successful around the country. I think that I would expect that committee to look at other high schools with our community demographics and look at those that are successful, however they determine that in terms of preparing children for the future, and look at how they're doing that. You know, I think there are many schools out there that have integrated ninth graders in a really thoughtful way where they're being, you know, they're thriving.
Okay, and what about the special programs, say special programs like Discovery? Will that need to move, or will
Not
it
at this
stay
time.
there? Okay,
Yes, Discovery
it's
will
only
stay there.
Explore. You're only talking
Right.
about Explore.
Right.
Will create the space.
Discovery is at Madrona, the Madrona campus.
Oh, my mistake. Of course.
No, that's okay. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm glad I got one. I got one right.
You got one right. Yeah. So this person says, NS again, it seems like you're just extending the disruption over more years. It's just kind of like ripping the Band-Aid off, so to speak. New teachers and more students every year for 3 years rather than just creating what will be the true eventual environment by moving everyone at once and having everyone adapt at once.
Well, I think a system is like an organism. You know, I think you can poke it so many times and it can continue to live, and that one last time it just, you know, goes belly up at some point. And so I think in the planning year, as we contemplate what is a, if you will, pilot group so that we can make sure that the structures and systems are in place, I think that's going to be very important. I would hope as we move forward, in the phase-in plan, Chris, frankly, we also heard from many parents that they didn't feel like they wanted their children up in the 9th grade yet. They weren't sure that that was what they wanted. Yeah. I was in Fred Meyer last weekend and happened to walk by, I think it was the cat food aisle, and there were 2 parents and talking about moving 9th graders to the high school. So of course I stopped because I thought, and I talked with them, and of course one was adamant that they wanted their daughter going to the high school at 9th grade, and the other said absolutely not.
Yeah.
You know, we don't want our 9th grade daughter at the high school. So I think that there's still some disagreement, obviously, within our community, and we wanted to make sure there's choice. And if a parent really has reservations about it, at least for another year, there's a different option. And we think that choice is really important while people get used to the idea.
Let's sort of hypothetically say that, you know, the bond passes, you're on your way to a second high school, the bond passes in 2016. Right. What's the soonest it would be built?
Generally, rule of thumb, according to Tom O'Brien, our facilities director, is 4 years. So it would be 2020 before the new high school would be open, unless there's some type of accelerant either in the planning or the building. But I would say conservatively 4 years.
And how would kids be assigned to that school? Would it be geographic, or?
It's a great question.
Do you have any idea about that?
When I look at other districts who've built a second high school, and Snohomish is an example that's somewhat similar to our community, when they built Glacier Peak, or when Renton added new high schools, or Issaquah added new high schools, they often didn't have a senior class at the new high school in the first year because kids they'd been through a certain high school. So often it's common to leave a senior class within the traditional high school and begin populating the new high school from the 9th grade up. But, you know, I'm sure that's a few years out, and those details will be planned as one got closer to opening that school.
Okay, gotcha. And this raises a question that I've also heard out there, and I have the same question about the effect on the sports program. I mean, you've got South Kitsap, which is 4A.
That's right,
yeah,
4A.
4A. And so if you take some kids away, will that change the league?
No, it would be not. It wouldn't be a lot different than the Peninsula School District, where you have Peninsula and Gig Harbor High School, and Gig Harbor, I believe, is 4A, and Peninsula is 3A. So what we would be contemplating, though it hasn't been fully decided, is the new high school would likely be a 3A high school, whereas the current high school would remain a 4A high school. So they wouldn't compete at the same classification level at the state level.
But pardon my not knowing how this works, but isn't it based on number of kids in the school? It is. Okay, but how does that not dilute, you know, your 4A school? If you have some kids, there's going to be fewer kids going.
Sure, there will be fewer kids going, but based on our overall district population, it's predictable we would still have a 4A high school and a 3A high school.
Okay.
Gig Harbor, or the Peninsula School District, still has roughly K through 12, 1,000 fewer kids than we do. So, and they have a 4A and 3A high school. So the demographics and the metrics would predict we would also have a 4A and 3A high school.
Okay. Great.
And, back to your question about will it dilute athletics, I think how exciting if you could have twice as many point guards playing in basketball, or twice the starting catchers, or twice the ASB presidents. I mean, it just gives more kids an opportunity to be part of something special.
And what about athletic facilities? I mean, would the second high school get
that
the same or similar?
That has not been determined. That's something they're discussing. The board will be looking at the ed specs for a bond probably in August or September at this point.
And when do you expect a decision would be made on whether to run the bond and when to run the bond?
The board will be making that decision this fall.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Awesome. Okay. So it says if the first phase in year, does not go as planned, would everything go back to the way it was? Is there a possibility of backing out of this idea?
It's a great question. I guess I never contemplate the possibility things won't go well. But I think it would put a pause on the process, for sure. I don't know that we would go back, but I don't know. That's a great question.
Okay.
I'll jot that down. It may cause us to pause and do a reset, but I think we're committed to the reconfiguration as a whole.
Okay.
But if there's something we need to monitor and adjust, it might cause us to pause and slow it down. Absolutely.
Okay. All right. So I'm unable to see the. Okay. If the bond doesn't pass, has any thought been given to turning Sedgwick into a magnet school?
I have not heard that thought. So I think if the bond doesn't pass, there'll be a lot of thoughts. But I think right now Sedgwick is really focused on STEM education at this point. And I know that teachers there have spent a great deal of time on that topic, and some of them have been, in fact, this last couple weeks in professional development with the University of Washington oceanography researchers, and are going to be bringing some exciting technology into the classroom around plate tectonics under the ocean. It's very, very intriguing.
Is that
the STEM
thing?
Yeah, it's exciting. Okay. And our kids, I think, are going to be so excited to be able to read data in real time about areas under the ocean that we've really just, nibbled at exploring. So it's going to be exciting. But to answer the question directly,
yes.
Haven't thought about that, but I will make a note of it. So I appreciate the feedback.
Yeah, because if you've got some kids moving out of buildings, there's, possible new life for different buildings.
So I guess I would ask the questioner, if we can ask them back, a magnet school of what? A magnet middle school, or a magnet high school, or a magnet 6 through 12 high school? Or I'm wondering what their thought was on that.
2 9 through 12s.
2 9 through 12s. Oh, having Sedgwick be a 9 through 12, that's just a different type of, oh, interesting.
Using the building in a different way.
Okay.
Okay. So that just brings to my other question. Do you have other questions for the audience out there? Anything that you would like to know, or that you're hoping to, information that you're hoping to garner as the process goes forward?
Sure. That's a great question, Chris. I think that a lot of parents, I think every parent, wants the best possible experience for their child, right? And we want our future to be crafted by amazing, innovative young people, South Kitsap graduates. So I guess my question for folks is, in a transition, particularly, let's talk about the high school for a moment, in moving 9th graders to the high school, what is the most important part of that experience that parents value, so that we make sure we tend to that? So that would be a question I would have for the public. What part of that student experience is most critical to parents or families?
Okay, great. All right. Well, Are we coming up with any other questions here from folks? I'm not seeing them.
There's a second poll up.
Okay, so regarding the poll on the high school, 70% say that they are willing to pay for it. So there you go. There's some feedback for you.
Okay, interesting. So 70% of the people
Watching
with
This
us
is the
tonight.
poll. Well, yeah, like don't know if we're. The poll was
Seahawks
about,
aren't playing yet, so it could be a wild crowd out there. So.
I'm sure you're a wild crowd. Okay.
Someone's asking about potential partnership with Olympic College.
Oh, right, the partnership
sure.
with OC.
No, that's actually really exciting. The Olympic College Board of Trustees met with our school district board recently at our June work session meeting, and in looking at a new high school facility, we've reached out to them, and I would say one of the goals in that mutual meeting was to contemplate how we might share a facility, so that if we're going to go out to voters to ask for a bond, what would a facility look like that could be shared so that Olympic College could hold classes there, maybe outside our school hours, that other adults in the community could use it for coursework. It really grew out of an idea that all of us are paying taxes. I live in the South Kitsap School District, as I'm sure many of our people with us tonight, and we're paying taxes for our schools, right? And we also pay taxes that pay for college buildings. And I think I would appreciate some of the science labs are very expensive, or CTE courses, electrical engineering labs, for example. And if we could build one well at perhaps a new high school site that the college could also use, then as a taxpayer I appreciate that, because I don't have to build two of them, 10 miles apart. So we're really looking at how can we partner to better prepare young people for post-secondary education, as well as use our resources more efficiently and effectively. So more to come on that.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
for sure. Okay, so the next steps on this, the ninth grade, I'm focusing on the ninth grade move up because that's what everybody's focused on, is the high school and the crowding and whatnot, but I realize there's more to it than that. What are the next steps?
Well, let me just comment about, everyone's talking about the ninth grade crowding.
Mm-hmm.
I think the reboundary committee also, we had to make a conversation around which end of the system is most impacted, and that was the long-range capital facility conversation.
Yeah.
Because the addition of all-day kindergarten, which is great, and the state is funding it, and we're excited to be able to offer it now at all 10 schools. But if you have 700 kindergartners, roughly, and you have roughly 25 in a class, which that's high for kindergarten. Our class sizes are lower than that. But even if you said that's what it was, that would be 4 times 7, which would be roughly 28, right, sections. And when they were half day, you could put 2 sections in a room at a time. But when they're full day, it doubles the amount of classrooms you need. So rather than 14, you need 28 classrooms. And so that adds 14 classrooms in our elementaries we have to find, as well as the increase in our special education preschool program.
Right.
And those children who are doing amazingly well and a very committed staff are requiring more and more classroom space. They've outgrown Madrona Elementary in terms of space, so we're moving those classrooms now to elementary schools. So we're either going to need at some point to be adding portables to elementary schools, or we're going to have to add space at the high school, so because the system can only...
The push is at, the growth is at the elementaries.
It is right now, yes.
Okay, and let me...
class size is being cut. Do you know what I'm saying? Like the state talked about class size K3, and we've tried to eliminate split classrooms and adding all-day K. So it's really affecting the available space we have at elementary.
Well, and I should have addressed this at the beginning, but what are the enrollment projections? Because one of Mr. Land's concerns, is that in 2007, there were these projections
Right.
that were based on really on added housing, and then we had the recession.
Right.
And, I understand that it's not an exact science, but it ought to be if you're paying a consultant to,
Right.
to project what's going to happen.
Mhm.
How do you know that that you're not just going to continue to
Right.
decline in enrollment? How do you know that the enrollment will support
Well, Chris,
the need?
Yeah, for the first time this past fall in 16 years, our enrollment rose. In fact, we finished the year 280 over our budget enrollment. And we believe that our enrollment's going to continue to steadily increase. I think that the demographer clearly, and I have a lot of respect for Bob Lamb. I think he's amazing, and he's really been a key player in our budget committee and really helped us think through how to restore, our budget in the district. So I have the high regard for Bob. And he, I think, has the demographic predictions from the prior bond campaign. And clearly, hindsight is a great opportunity. Clearly, things didn't play out the way the demographer thought they would. But I don't think anyone foresaw the recession either, or the building that stopped and all of the things that happened. And I've also heard people say, well, what would have happened if we had passed the bond? Maybe people would have moved to be able to go to the second high school.
Right.
So you just don't know. I can't go back and recreate history.
Right.
All I can say today is that we have more and steadily more kids coming to South Kitsap School District because we have amazing staff and programs at the district. And we have an agreement and commitment to keep our class sizes lower than they were in 2007.
Mm-hmm.
And we have all-day kindergarten that we didn't have in 2007.
And the state is reducing, and you've got
Right.
1351. We don't know where that's
Right.
going to go, but if that comes in, then
Right.
we need more space.
And I guess for me, if I
Yeah.
have to, my personal belief, and I think the Boundary Committee shares that, rather than add more portable classrooms at the elementary level with the little ones, it's probably a more logical move to put that at the secondary if we have to add portables for the older kids.
Okay. And I was going to ask something. What was it? Oh, yeah. How recently have you done an updated demographic study with the projections?
Last summer.
It was last summer. Okay.
Right. Well, we have to
And
every
can
year
people
for budgeting.
find that? People find that on your website?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Where would that be?
Under enrollment, so
Okay.
you would go to the district, and I believe there's an index, or Amy Miller, or email me, and I can get it to them.
Okay. We have a question. Haven't other school districts had success with transitioning 6th grade to junior high and 9th grade to high school without taking 3 to 4 years to make it happen? So it seems like you're getting a little pushback on this.
Right. Yeah, I look at, as a parent of a 6th grader, I'd rather have my son at a crowded high school with countless opportunities than be at a junior high with limited. Okay. Well, I think if there's enough energy that gets going in the community, as I said before, we could accelerate that process. But what I don't want to do, and our board is committed to parent choice and family. We want to make sure we're doing what's best for children and families. We believe educationally, the K-5, 6, 8, 9, 12 is the best model for our program delivery. But we also respect that parents are the first teachers for their children, and it's important that parents and families have choices.
Okay. Okay. We've got a question about what's the district going to do to ensure that more kids at the same campus, that each child gets individualized experience and has positive relationships with their teachers. The suggestion here is that the quiet, unassuming kids often fall through the cracks. So the kids who are,
Right.
needing some attention get
Right.
attention, and the well-behaved kids, the kind of silent majority in the middle, get left out. What's the district doing about that?
Well, number one, I would say our high school staff are really committed, caring, compassionate people. The teachers, support staff, secretaries, administrators, custodians, they really care. And I think what we have to remember is that if we have good systems and good structures in place, kids will be able to be known well and have their work known well. As you know, my background is being a high school principal. I was an assistant principal or principal for 19 years in a 9-12 high school. And I think it's very important that kids feel known, that someone notices if they don't show up, right? It needs to matter that they're there. They need to feel connected to something. And the more programs and activities that we have available to kids, the more connected they are. And I think then they're more successful they're able to be. I think that there's a great deal of discussion right now among our district principal team that talks about, the top 20% of our students often receive a certain amount of attention and have a certain level of drive and determination, and those students performing in the bottom 20%.
This is exactly what this question is. And with the idea of bringing 9th graders up to the high school, there is the potential for that quiet group in the middle to get lost in the sauce.
Right, which is that 60%. And we, right now, I think if you sat in any of our principal meetings this past year, that has come up every meeting, that 60%, which in a way, there's been a lot of discussion about the middle class, if you will, and the disappearing middle in our country. There's a book about the hollowing out of the middle. And I want to believe that our schools, if we can do a better job with that middle, will enable to better support a middle class for our country, because our country models what our schools are. So I think part of that high school committee task that's going to study how best to integrate 9th graders into the high school, part of their task is going to be what structures are you going to set up and put into place to better support kids in their personalized pathway. And from my standpoint, there are many. I can think of Link Crew for anybody that's out there that's perhaps attended another school or been in another community. That's a mentorship program that also has upperclassmen mentoring 9th graders. Right. So there are just a variety of structures, and I know our staff is going to be really sifting through all of that research and come up with great recommendations for our future wolves. Okay.
So as we're getting ready to wrap this up here, we wanted to invite any final questions here, but the discussion isn't over. You can email me, you can email the district. I'm going to keep reporting on this. I did want to ask, since we've got a lot of interest out there, if somebody wanted to get on one of these committees, are there sort of criteria, or how are these committees going to be formed?
Well, we want them to be representative committees, so we would want some equivalent representation from the various schools or communities within the district. At some point, we would have to limit it to being manageable, in the sense that we don't want a committee of 200 in a anteroom. But the committee meetings, of course, would be public, so anyone could attend. But I think the boundary review committee was fairly large, and the 40+.
How were those folks chosen?
Each school selected 2 parents, and then the principal came. So I'm not sure, each school selected their parents a little differently, I think. I don't know if they were PTSA representatives. The
leadership would say, you'd be good, go do this or whatever.
Honestly, Chris, I don't know. We just put it out there that we wanted 2 parent representatives from every school, and I think each school community is unique. I suspect they had different ways of putting that together.
Okay, and just to clarify again, who is it that makes the final decision on how the process will be done?
At this point, I'm the superintendent, and I'm making the recommendation in terms of how the process will be done. The board is intimately involved in the conversation, and at this point supports that 4-year phase-in process. But
if you had a sense that the board was not on board, so to speak, with what you were doing, would that give you pause or?
Absolutely.
Okay, so you can talk to your board member and.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. And attend the meetings.
Attend the meetings. I think that also the process is very fluid. Tomorrow on my blog, and my blog's on my website, I will. It's on the district website. It's a superintendent blog. So the memo will be out there, and there are a number of decision points.
Okay.
So. I would be surprised if everything goes exactly as it's laid out, but I think that's the general pathway.
Okay, and then we've got one final question here about the open enrollment concept. What if you get a big slew of parents that want one thing or the other, and you can't accommodate them? How will you make the choice?
Well, Chris, I think in many districts across this country, they do a lottery. I'm not saying that that's the way we're going to do it, but there are many schools of choice in many districts. I know Tacoma has schools of choice. There's Sammy School, or their School of the Arts. There's the Conservatory Lab School in Boston. There are many public schools and districts in our country that can't assimilate all kids immediately, and there are waiting lists, or there are ways that they have to draw names, or I'm not sure what that looks like for us, but there would have to be some objective, I think, process or criteria from which we chose. But there are a lot of schools where not every kid or child that wants to be in it are able to be all across the country.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I don't think we've experienced that here in South Kitsap, but that's often a case in many larger districts.
Got it. Okay, well, great. Well, we're going to wrap up our chat for this evening, and again, thanks you all for joining us, and thanks, Michelle, for being with us.
I'll have to get lights that are not quite as bright next time. So.
Okay. All right. Good evening.
Yeah, good evening.